Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another Spun Monday. And I hope that everyone is having a great start to your week. Keep in mind, I don't want any surprises, okay? So keep in mind that the enemy's plan is one, to either ruin your day or ruin your week or every day of the week. So just always be prepared for that. But then I don't want you to let that prevent you from living your best life, both mentally, spiritually, and physically. And on that word, let's start. So today we're going to talk about even in our disobedience. And it was funny, the Lord gave me that tagline, and that's all I heard, even in our disobedience. And what came to mind to me is that even in our disobedience, God still loves us. Even in our disobedience, He will never leave you. Even in your disobedience, His grace is extended to you daily. But here, the operative word here. So when I heard that, I heard the but, okay? But even our disobedience, He's going to do all of that for us. But guess what? The trials that you're faced with will continue until you learn how to walk in obedience to what God, or be obedient to what God is telling us to do. And it's very impactful because then He brought me to Jonah. You know, remember Jonah? The one that was swallowed up by the whale? So Jonah 1, verse 1, 2, 3 states, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it. For the wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of God. You hear what he did? When God spoke to him and told him to go to Nineveh, he didn't want to do what God tells him to do. Isn't that like familiar to where, many times we ask God for answers, or we ask him and he gives us an answer, right? But then the answer that he gives, or sometimes we're just minding our business and the Lord will come and drop a word and say, go do this, Cameron. Go do this, Andrea. Go do this, Dion. Go do it. And then we in our fleshly ways say, I don't want to do that. That's, or I don't want to go in that street corner to go preach the gospel because, But I want to encourage you that many times that when God gives us instructions and asks us to do things, it always relates to impacting other people's lives. And in our disobedience, we can run away from what he tells us to do. But keep in mind that when we run away from doing what he's telling us to do, that it impacts the people around us. And in the book of Jonah, where it talks about where Jonah got on the ship, right? He did get on that ship and said, you know what, I'm going to hide, mind my business. He's going to go into the lower part of the ship. That's what he did, because he's like, I'm just going to lay here. I'm going to fall asleep. But what happened while he was sleeping? Remember, God told you to do something. Jonah decided to fall asleep on the job. Yes, he did. And he went into the bottom of the ship, minding his business, figuring that God is not the all-omnipotent one, that he can't find Jonah, right? So Jonah went into the bottom of the ship. And what happened? A storm hit the ship. The ship was on its way of sinking. The storm would not let up. And out of Jonah's disobedience, the people on the ship was at the risk of going under. So you see how being disobedient to what God is asking us to do, ties in to other people's lives. So what they had to do, they prayed and said, everyone prayed to their God. Jonah had to fess up and said, you know what? I think it's my God that's actually doing this. And then even in that state where he confessed, the people in the ship didn't want to turn him over, throw him onto the sea. But what got me was where, and it goes back to where even in our disobedience, right? Jonah 1, verse 17 says, now the Lord, when they threw Jonah over into the water, remember, they were going to throw him into the water. The Bible said in verse 17 of Jonah 1, now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. And within the belly, Jonah decided to just say, God, you're everything. Because he could have just been tossed over into that rough water and died. But God said, you know what, Jonah? Even in your disobedience, I am going to keep you. And then what did Jonah did? He finally went to Nineveh and he went and shared the gospel. Now, you know what was so profound about this whole story? Jonah went, and because of his obedience to God and being obedient to what God is asking him, that entire city was saved. So it shows you the two impacts, right? Walking in disobedience means some people around you, even though if you don't care about being impacted yourself, people around you will be impacted, and not for the better. That's one. Think about the people on the ship. 2, when God gives you an order, it usually represents for a larger impact that can change for the good for others. But what did Jonah did? He went to the city, preached. God said, hey, they fasted, they laid out in sackcloth from the king down to everyone. And they basically, God said, you know what? He's not going to destroy Nineveh. Jonah, what did he do? He got upset. He's like, listen, Lord, I knew you were going to do that. Basically, when he said, I knew you were going to do that, you're going to forgive them. In his mind, I'm thinking, Jonah's like, why did you have to put me through all of this? You could have just done that. I knew you were going to do that, right? So God, in his ways, he said, okay, Jonah, and he said, why did you do that? And then God had to come back and say to him, basically God was saying, who are you to tell me what to do or what not to do? Whose life to spare? I want you to know that when you walk in disobedience of what God is asking you to do, it's going to impact people around you and not for the better. But when you walk into obedience of what God is asking you to do, it will be a blessing and change and impact lives. So my question to you is, what is it that God has asked you to do that you have not done? I charge you to share your story or send a personal email. And you don't have to share it with me. I want you to just go back to God and said, hey, you've told me to do this, and I have not done it. And I promise you, you'll realize that you having not done it is what's keeping you going around and around in a circle to bring about the change and the impact for the betterment of your good and for those around you. Thank you for joining me for another Spun Monday, and have a blessed week.